Hi everybody, I'm JJ, you're watching Reality Survival. So today I want to talk a little bit about the difference between fantasy and reality when it comes to home defense for the vast majority of people in the world. There's a lot of tough guy talk, about if you're defending your home from your front porch, you're wrong, or whatever that saying is, where they say that acting like if you have to defend yourself, even from your mailbox. I think some people say if you defend yourself from your mailbox or you defend yourself from your front porch, you're wrong, or whatever the case may be. So that's a dumb saying, all right? And here's the reason why. Reality is that 100% of the home defense shootings that have happened in the world up to this point have happened at your home. Right? I know that's a little bit of play on words there, but whenever people are in self-defense shootings because someone has broken into their home, they're defending their home from their home. Okay, and this is where we have to differentiate fantasy or a hypothetical SHTF situation where there's no rule of law and all bets are off. That is, you're going to defend your home differently in that situation than you are in reality. Okay, and by reality, what I'm saying is that, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% of people live in a city or in a suburb or in a neighborhood area. Okay, a very low percentage of people live out in the country in a rural setting, and okay, so where was I? Sorry about that, got a little quick interruption. So 90% of people, roughly, somewhere in that range, I don't know exactly what it is, but they live in neighborhoods, all right? They don't live in a place where it's really rural and all that kind of stuff. And so the reality for them is that they don't have any choice but to defend their home from their front porch or bedroom or wherever the case may be. And so it's really important for that 90% of people to take home security and home defense seriously, because crime also happens to be higher in those areas. And they are much more likely to have to deal with the home invasion or a burglary or something along those lines. In 2018, there were 1,230,000 burglaries, armed burglaries, I believe, that took place in the United States. Okay, so there's statistically that breaks down to about 21 in every 1,000 homes ends up getting some broken into. So it's real. Okay, that's a real thing. And so you need to take home defense seriously. I've done a full lesson on home defense over at AmericanPreppingAcademy.com. But real quick, the things that you need to worry about are deterrence. There's the 4 Ds of home security that all home professionals use. Sometimes they make it into 5, but it's really 4. Deterrence, detection, delay, and defend. Those are the things. And so deterrence, you want to make your house appear to be a harder target than other homes in the area. That's what deterrence is. Maybe it's putting out signs, maybe it's having just the way that you have your landscaping and all that kind of stuff. Again, we can get into a lot of that stuff in that lesson. Then you've got detection. We're talking about detection, having a security camera, having a home security system, all that kind of stuff. So that if somebody does try to break in, you get some notification and it lets you know that something's happening or somebody's there. Then you get into delay. Okay, now delay is where you want to make sure that you have you know, good doors on your house, windows. You know, if you're building the home, have them placed in the right places and in such a manner that it's not going to be real easy, you know, for them to come through and all that kind of stuff. Maybe not have like glass doors like the one we got back here, but this is for us, it's a personal choice because we live in a very rural area where crime is very low and we want to enjoy the beauty and all that kind of stuff. If I were living in a city, that wouldn't be an acceptable risk to me. But there's still things I can do to mitigate that, like putting on ballistic window film and the right kind of sealant on that film and everything to make it harder to get into. You can also put on door armor like I've talked about before, which is very effective. Okay, you can say that it's not effective if you don't know what it is or you've never actually tried to use it. But, and it's not like it's, I don't want people to get the impression that it's a end-all be-all to home security. That's not the case. What it is it's something that if it's installed correctly and used with the right locks and those kinds of things, then it slows people down. It's delaying their entry. It's not necessarily going to stop their entry. And so that is, oh, and then you have defend, the last D, and that is where you have to actively defend your home with, you know, a home defense rifle or shotgun or pistol or whatever the case may be. Okay. So that's the reality of home defense, and that is not during an SHTF situation. Those things happen often, and you have no choice but to defend your home from your home, because it's not real to expect that people are going to be able to, you know, do patrols in their neighborhood and all this kind of stuff. To a certain extent, you might be able to have a neighborhood watch. You may be able to have some of those things, but to think that those things are going to stop crime from happening at all is just, it's silly, right? Okay, it's not the reality of the world that we live in. So it's my opinion that taking home defense and home security in a real life situation seriously is important. Now let's talk about home defense in a fantasy situation, because that's really what it is. It's very, statistically speaking, it's very unlikely that society is going to devolve, you know, into all-out madness, right? There's no question that society is getting worse and worse, but it's unlikely that it's going to turn into the Mad Max scenario that everybody has in their head. There's probably always going to be some degree of you know, law and order to some extent. Now, it's possible, yes, it's possible that those things could happen, right? And the more prepared you become for the real world things, then the better off you'll be in the fantasy kind of things, right? And everybody likes to talk about the fantasy stuff and all that, and that's cool. Those are the videos that always get the most views and all that kind of stuff, because as preppers, we just tend to want to focus on those kinds of hypothetical kinds of situations, and that's fine. It's fun for discussion and all that, but it's not actually very real. So when you're talking about setting up a home defense plan for most people in a hypothetical situation like that, Southern Prepper has got some good videos he's talked about recently about how you could work together with your neighbors to set up some fencing and, you know, and do patrols and those kind of things. And that's all really, really good advice. Okay, it's great. It's good stuff. The issue that we need to understand is that kind of increased super high tension home security situation where you're literally out doing patrols at midnight trying to keep people away from your perimeter and all this kind of hoo-yah hardcore prepper stuff, you can only keep that up for a very limited period of time. Okay, sorry if you think otherwise. It's just the reality of the situation. Unless you have a really extensive logistics system and a really extensive, a group with a lot of people, you cannot defend any particular area 100% of the time with the vast majority of groups that are out there. Okay, the reason is it just boils down to logistics. You won't have the manpower and the ability to get all the things done that you need to survive, and also incorporate these patrols and all this kind of stuff on a 24-hour basis. There might be a handful of people out there that can do that on a sustainable level, but for the majority of people, that is going to be an extremely limited thing, because it is very personnel intensive, and it's also it wears you down. Okay, it wears you down a lot. And so let's say it was worst case scenario, right? And it's a complete without rule of law situation. It's like an EMP went off and the government has collapsed and there's chaos everywhere, and we've got this 2-year period where, you know, people are gonna be going crazy and trying to get your food and everything that we talk about in all these prepper videos, right? There's probably only a, you know, maybe it's a 6-month window or somewhere in that range time frame where the chaos is going to be so bad that you're going to be on that high alert kind of situation, right? And in those situations, the people that live out in rural areas like I do, that you're going to be able to do things like, you know, having fencing and you know, detours and roads and roadblocks and checkpoints and different things like that. Like I've talked about lots of this stuff in previous videos. You'll be able to do lots of things to defend your property from far away, right? Having your intelligence network, we got a whole lesson on that, a couple of lessons on that on the website. You can do all of those things to try to protect your area, okay? But people that are in a city are going to have a much more difficult time with that. The reality of the situation is that that is not going to be sustainable very long in the city, and so you have to understand that. Trying to think of how the best way to explain this is, even let's say if you have an area like Southern Prepper One on his videos recently, and I'll try to throw a link down to the ones I'm talking about in there. I thought they were really good. Let's say you've got a really good community of people that live around you, you know, and you come together and you do really good, and you work together really well and everything like that, and you're doing good defending it, your home and all that kind of stuff. That has a limited scope of time for, you know, how long you're going to be able to keep that up. You really need to have a fallback plan. You really need to have additional, you know, plans. You know, the primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. You need to think about what's going to happen when the group dynamics start falling apart. Okay, because when everybody has food and all that kind of stuff in your home suburban area and all that, and you guys are able to make it, people will cooperate and they'll get by. And maybe you and 3 or 4 others in the group have got enough food to sustain people for a little while, maybe a month or 2 or 2 or 3 or something along those lines. But eventually that's going, and maybe you can do scavenger runs and you can make this go a little bit longer, right? I'm not saying that it's not possible to make it last a little bit longer, but eventually you're going to come to the question of, well, we're running very low on food and we can see that the situation isn't getting better, so what are we going to do, right? And that's where group dynamics start to fall down, because different people reach their critical mass at different levels, at different times. And then so you start to see group dynamics really break down in those situations. And that is where you're going to need to know when to cut bait and go to plan B, you know, or something along those lines. And that follows true for people that live in rural areas as well. You know, their group dynamics, that timeline for rural areas is longer than the city times, just because you've got probably less mouths to feed, you have more capability to be self-sufficient, you have animal husbandry and different things like that, and you can really expand that timeline out. And that's why I've always recommended to you that you definitely try to, if you can, move to a less populated area, move to a more rural area. You got a lot of benefits in that and living in those places. But the problems that they have to face are still the same in many cases. In a rural area, the problems that you run into are that you can't effectively patrol a perimeter that encompasses a large area with any effectiveness. You can't do it. You can try, and you can have a presence, and you can do some things to kind of, you know, ensure that you hold your area. But I can 100% guarantee you that if I know where you live, and I meaning just a bad guy, not me per se, but I want to infiltrate your perimeter and do reconnaissance on your home, or maybe take one of you out every 7 days or 6 days or something along that, and start to get attrition into your manpower and all that kind of thing. That's easy to do. It's not hard. If anybody who has even just the basic principles of you know, evasion and camouflage and you know, long-range shooting and those kinds of things, it is not difficult to take down somebody in a rural area if you had to. So it's just different problem sets that you have to be willing to deal with. And my point in saying all this is that when you're facing those kinds of threats, the place that you fall back to is your home. It's always your home. It's always your base, okay? And to act like that your home is never going to be the place that you would fight from is just short-sighted and silly, because it is the place that you'll fight from in almost every situation. Now, maybe you get lucky enough and you're able to engage people at roadblocks or checkpoints or whatever the case may be. But if your adversary is a near peer, okay, what I'm saying is your adversary is not always necessarily going to be somebody who's an idiot or a meth head or a bunch of you know, dumb kids or something along that lines. Your adversary might be just as smart as you, or might be better trained than you. And you need to think about that, because just like we've talked about with setting up roadblocks and keeping people out of your area and all that kind of stuff, somebody who has some intelligence and who's got a little bit of experience in military affairs or whatever the case may be. I think we've got more than, what, 2 million veterans. It might even be more than that. It might even be 20 million. I don't even remember. It's tons and tons of veterans that are out there who have military experience. If they're out and about and they're scavenging and all that kind of stuff, doing whatever, you know, in this hypothetical without rule of law situation, and they come across a group of people who have their stuff together, and you know, they're blocking roads or whatever the case may be, all they have to do is to start doing a little testing to try to penetrate, and then they're going to map all that out, and they're going to clearly see, hey, here's the area that they're protecting. They have resources, they have manpower, they're protecting something that's worthwhile. And at that point, you put yourself into a defensive position to where if you are going against somebody who has knowledge, skills, and ability, you're going to have a very difficult time, right? And it's just easy to pick people off in those situations, okay? So you have to there's always trade-offs. That's the main point that I'm trying to say here, is that in the city, the way that most people live, they're going to be forced to defend their home from their home. Maybe they can push out and do some neighborhood watches and things like that, but in reality, that's what's going to happen. In an SHTF situation, it's really the same thing, because even though they might be able to work together in a few, with a few groups or people in your neighborhood or whatever, it's still relatively close in one small area. And even then, that's going to break down at some point. It's not going to go long term. Also, with the people in the rural areas, in reality, rural areas during normal times is easier for people to break into. Okay, you don't have patrols, you don't have the ability to, keep an eye on everything that's going on around you and all that kind of stuff, because you're in a remote area. You can't see everything. You don't know what's going on. So the reality of the situation is that you're not out patrolling every night. You're not out. And even if you are, even if you act like you are doing that, your patrol isn't effective enough to keep somebody out who wants to come in. It's easy to sit and watch and wait for the patrol to go by and then go right past and you're inside their perimeter. It's just not hard, okay? And then you sit up outside the house and you can see what's going on in the house. And guess what? Everybody goes home to sleep at night. There's nobody out there sleeping in the bushes and all that kind of stuff. And so now I know where you're at, I know what's going on, and it's an easy target. You see, so you always fall back to defending yourself from your home. That's the reality of the world. If you're acting like that's not the case, you're just not acknowledging reality. That's the bottom line. So, you guys the armchair rangers can tell me that I'm wrong and all that kind of stuff. That's totally cool. Everybody has their opinions. It still doesn't mean you're right because I'm right. There's no exceptions really to this rule, unless you are a significant paramilitary force where you have the capability to have a dedicated guard force. And I'm talking, it's substantial numbers. It's substantial numbers that it takes to be able to hold a piece of ground with airtight security all the time, so that you're not defending yourself from your home. Okay, that is, I've spent the last 20 years, being involved in counterintelligence and counterintelligence support to force protection for air bases and deployed environments and all that kind of stuff. I know what the logistics look like, and it is not achievable for the vast majority of people. So the idea that you're not going to defend yourself from your home and that you're doing something that is making a difference to keep people from being able to attack you there is just flat out wrong. So anyway, guys, I'm all done. That's my soapbox. It's reality survival, and I got to call them like I see them, because that's the name of the channel, I guess. I don't know. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and don't forget to live 6 P's. Proper prior preparation prevents poor performance. Stay safe, guys. Oh, so I do want to say one other thing. I do want to say that I am not saying this. I'm not saying this to make people think that they shouldn't take home defense seriously. It's exactly the opposite. I'm saying this, and I'm putting this all out to you guys to get you to understand that it is important. The 4 Ds of home security are important. The idea of thinking about what you're going to do in an SHTF situation is important. Having those plans are all important, but you have to understand that they will break down over time. They will atrophy, or they're going to suffer consequences. So you need to have layered plans, backup plans to your backup plans to your backup plans, because when it falls apart, what do I do next? you know, and you need to think about that. Even, it doesn't matter if you're in an urban setting or if you're in a rural setting, all of the plans that you have will eventually break down, and they're not going to work as you think they're going to, because humans are very crafty people. And if your adversary is other humans and they're determined, you cannot guarantee that you're going to win. You know, though bullets fly in both directions, and people who have had the opportunity to sit and watch and study what happens and what you're doing and all that kind of thing, where, you know, what I'm saying is the person who is, when you're defending a place, you're at a certain degree of a disadvantage. If you're the offender and you can choose the time and place and when you make your attack and how long you do your recon and all those kinds of things, then you have a huge advantage, because you can just do hit and run attacks, you can do all kinds of things, and you know, even that person in a rural setting is super vulnerable. Regardless of how much security you think you have, you're very vulnerable. So yeah, I do think it's important. I just want everybody to understand that you need to think about what happens when it breaks down, and where do I move to the next stage? How do I navigate these issues? You know, because sometimes it isn't outside issues. It isn't maybe people who are attacking you. It might be people within the group who become power hungry and who decide to try to usurp you, or people who become desperate because they don't have food, or it might be your rural neighbor that knows that you're doing really well and he was on your team and he was supposed to be a part of your network, but he decided that he's going to take you out instead. There's just a lot of dynamics to all this stuff. So that's really the main thing I'm trying to point out, because it isn't just as simple as I'm not gonna defend myself, you know, from my front porch or whatever. That is so reducing it to such a simple level that it's just not an accurate representation of what you have to think about if you're going to be dealing with these things. So anyway, I'm done. Sorry.